Let's go to the phones. Right now, we get to talk a little Republican Party politics and what's happening in the GOP primary. We might also take a little bit of a look what's happening with the Democrats. Joining me right now, Republican strategist and co-founder of MustReadTexas.com, Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Chad. Good morning. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for coming on today. Donald Trump still in the news. He came out with his immigration policy yesterday. He's still in first place in the polls that have been taken afterwards. First, are you surprised that Donald Trump is still leading in the polls? Second, from what you saw with his immigration policy, is this something that other candidates should be talking about? Maybe coming up with their own policies? How should other candidates handle the new Trump policy on immigration?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. He's really been kind of forced to put serious policy ideas out there because he's really been totally, I think, bankrupt from a substance standpoint for the first 2 months of the campaign. But they did rush out this 6-page immigration white paper. It looks like it was developed with Jeff Sessions, a senator from Alabama, who's a real hardliner on immigration. I think, first of all, it's going to force all the presidential candidates to respond to it. And they're going to have to make a choice. Do they want to be essentially aligned with the base in terms of very hardline, immigration views? Or are they going to be more sort of middle of the road? Are they going to be more worried perhaps about the general election? And honestly, this is, to some extent, the strategic choice that Mitt Romney faced in the last campaign. And, of course, he got a lot of negative attention for talking about self-deportation. Well, in this case, Trump is taking the word self out and just saying deportation. Look, the plan itself raises a lot of serious questions. First of all, he talks about deporting everyone who's here illegally. That may be a nice idea for hardliners, but the question is of how you actually do that. How long would it take? How large would the government have to be? And most importantly, what would it cost?
Yeah.
He can't answer, those questions. The cost would be enormous if you're talking about 11 or 12 million people. The federal government can't even deliver the mail on time, let alone identify and deport 11 or 12 million people. So that's the biggest, I think, question that faces his plan is how you do that. Now, in terms of the border wall, and Mexico paying for it, that's a good talking point. It makes people feel good about punishing Mexico, but Mexico's already said they're not going to do that. And so maybe he'd slap a tariff on there. I don't know. But, look, I think it's more substance. It starts the conversation, but it does force Republicans to say, let's say, whether they are as hardline on this issue as he is or whether they have a different approach, perhaps in the mold of someone like Jeb Bush.
I think for Donald Trump, and one thing that, people who don't mind Donald Trump being into the race, one of the reasons they have is he's forcing other candidates to talk about issues. He's done so, I think, in a way that has not been great for the primary race. But this, I think, actually putting substance out there and is good for the Republican Party, because then, okay, let's see what Rubio's plan really would be. Let's see what Jeb Bush's plan would really be. What about Carly Fiorina? So it helps that debate going forward.
I agree. I do think this is positive. And now, Trump's going to have to engage on policy. He's going to have to answer tough questions. He's going to have to explain his ideas, explain why they're better than other candidates' ideas. I think that's a positive development. If he can hold up and answer questions and provide substance, that he'll go a long way to answering questions that a lot of critics have about him. There is a sense that he's sort of flying by the seat of his pants. This is not a campaign that's very strategic. It's not very organized. They don't have a lot of staff. They're not building the kind of organization that you need to. And honestly, the opportunity to do that is there. I mean, if you just look at the coverage of him at the Iowa State Fair, I mean, he got the largest crowds perhaps in the history of the State Fair.
Yeah.
And so if they were there collecting names and email addresses and phone numbers for all those people, I'd be shocked. But that's certainly what they need to do, because if those people are likely caucus goers that could turn out on a snowy Tuesday night in Iowa on February 1st.
There were a couple stories last week about the outsiders, and the outsiders who are rising, and some stories said that this was the new GOP, or at least how the voters are. This is a new feeling for voters, the outsider movement. But you look in the past, and we've had this before with Rudy Giuliani, with last year, or last election cycle, Herman Cain was an outsider. Now you just have more outsiders, it seems. Do you think that the outsiders as a whole, Donald Trump, Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina, do any of them have what it takes to have that major impact on the race after Iowa and into the Iowa caucus?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There's no question that since the last debate, Trump, Fiorina, and Carson have all benefited. And so there is a straight line through the three of those candidacies in that they are complete outsiders. They're not responsible for the system that we're in. And they can run against not just Washington, but also they can run against sort of the party establishment and the party elders. That there's a lot of anger towards that group from the conservative base. I have my doubts about all three about whether they can ultimately be the nominee. I think Carly Fiorina has the highest ceiling. She's still probably not known by about half of Republican primary voters, and she, I think, is the most naturally talented candidate of those three. Carson is personally impressive. Not sure it fully translates as a candidate. He has a slow-speaking style. He doesn't know a lot of specifics when it comes to policy. I have a lot of doubts about the campaign he's built. But I think there is a lot of very positive feeling towards him. Obviously, the biggest question mark is Trump. It looks like he's got about 25% of the vote. That's a lot when there's a field of 17 candidates. It also means three-quarters of voters aren't for him. So when this thing gets down to 3 or 4 or 5 candidates, after the first couple states, my guess is that if Trump is still alive by then, he's not viable. But that remains to be seen. He may be able to get through the fall, and look, he's defying political gravity every single day. He's shown greater durability and resiliency than any campaign that I can remember, and he's doing that with an outsider message that's certainly benefiting his candidacy.
Visiting with Matt Mackowiak, Republican political strategist. Let me ask you about the Democrats. It's possible that Joe Biden jumps into this. There was some chatter about Al Gore jumping into the race. I don't think he will. But what do you think? Is Joe Biden going to jump into this? And if he does, how does that impact the Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders race right now?
Yeah, listen, this is a fascinating development, and it's clear now that he's about a 50-50 chance to get in, perhaps slightly better. I saw someone was quoted as saying he's 60-40. To get in. The biggest challenge is he's going to have to raise a lot of money very quickly. He has the first Democratic debate is in mid-October. When you're vice president of the United States, the security costs are considerable. Flying around an Air Force Two, paying for the Secret Service, all that adds up very quickly. You're not like a former governor of Maryland who can travel around with 2 people. So he's going to have to raise money quickly. Whether he has the potential to do that or not, I don't know. My guess is that's the biggest thing he's trying to figure out. Look, there's 2 things pulling him into this race. It is, number one, Hillary Clinton's, political vulnerability, which has been blown wide open by this FBI investigation. But then number 2, the 2 stories that we saw in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal saying that both of his sons have urged him to run, including his late son, Beau. And so I think he's got sort of that personal tug towards running, that family tug towards running, but then also this realization that Bernie Sanders can't be the nominee and Hillary's badly wounded right now. So when you add both of those things together, I think Biden is increasingly seeing green lights towards running. Whether he can win or not, I don't know. I think the net effect is you have a weaker Democratic nominee because you have a much tougher Democratic primary that drags on much longer. And I think that's ultimately probably very good for Republicans.
Let's say Joe Biden jumps in, is it more likely that he takes votes away from Hillary Clinton than Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's why it probably benefits Bernie. On the one hand, for Bernie, you'd say, well, yeah, but Biden has a chance to be the nominee. He may sort of overtake Hillary and become the strongest candidate. Yes, but on the other hand, Hillary and Biden are going to split sort of mainstream Democratic votes, whereas Bernie's got basically the left all to himself. So we'll see. I mean, look, I think in the media there's a lot of doubt that Biden is getting in this thing so late that he can't win. I'm not convinced of that. I don't see any strength for Hillary in Iowa. Yeah. And while she's been stronger in New Hampshire, Sanders is from next door. And in fact, the poll last week had him up, I think, 5 or 6 points in New Hampshire on Hillary. So we'll see what happens. I think this email situation for Hillary is going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
What can people find on mustreadtexas.com today and this week?
Yeah, updating it this morning from over the weekend. You had Cruz finish up his Southern tour, which was very successful. across the southern states. I know he was in Vegas over the weekend, and I think he's out in the West the rest of this week. Obviously, Perry continues to go through Iowa and the early states with as little money as he's got, but certainly a lot of energy. So you'll have a lot of 2016 news. You can find it all at mustreadtexas.com.
All right, Matt Mackowiak, as always, appreciate your time.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Have a good one. It's Matt Mackowiak. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Mackowiak.